Hi, I'm Alan Adcock. I am CEO and owner of ASC Group here in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to Cyber Sentinel. In this video, we're going to discuss cyber liability insurance. And we have a guest today, Ralph Pasquariello, who is with Snellings Walters. Thank you, Ralph.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Well, I work with Snellings Walters here in Atlanta. We're headquartered here in Atlanta. Full insurance house. We do property casualty and all the rest of that stuff. I do specialize in property and casualty, but more on the professional liability end, which is, you and I have talked about previously, cyber liability, crime policies, errors and omissions, things like that.
So we here at ASC Group believe that every organization should have a cyber policy in place. It's one of our key fundamentals for protecting organizations. Talk a little bit about cyber crime, breach liability, those kind of policies, and what people need to have in place in today's world.
Right. Well, I'll go back about 10 years ago, Alan, when I used to push data breach insurance on people because that's what they needed. That's what was hot back then. We were all trying to protect our data. And now, fast forward 10 years later, things have changed. You and I both see that. The cyber crime that we're seeing now is not just, cyber insurance will not just protect you. You need to have a full breadth of insurance that kind of dovetails with each other. A good crime policy, along with, it depends on the industry you're in, along with maybe a tech E&O policies / cyber policy. The problem is not one size shoe that fits all in this industry, and there's no standardization among carriers. So if you're industry specific, you need to go and buy a policy that's going to cover you for those risks. So it's not an off-the-shelf type buyer beware, absolutely. And I do stress, look, security is number one. Insurance is always number two. You really need to buckle down and find people that are going to secure your endpoints and come in and assess your company and do their job. Then you buy insurance, but don't just buy something that looks good or because it's cheap. Get a full assessment, find out what your limits should be, and then buy a good policy.
Yeah, we see that a lot with people who have just kind of added a rider onto their basic business policies that covers, some of them are as small as like $10,000. And we know that in any kind of a full breach in situation or a ransomware attack, that'll maybe get you through the first day, and then you're on your own.
Right.
So are you seeing people usually under-prepared from the limit side, or are they getting more in line with what they need?
Yes, yeah, I do see that. I see a lot of underinsured companies and companies that have insurance that is not the right fit. So I'll give you an example. So I get a call from a company last week in Florida. They have a requirement from a new vendor that they need a $10 million policy for doing business with that company. So it's a compliance point in a contract. Company A wants to do business with company B. They tell them, look, here's what you need for a limit. So I say, why are you going to let a compliance contract drive what your limits should be for protection, right? So after I got off the phone with them, I said, look, your compliance is telling you 10 million, but really, if you do an assessment and you have a full-blown breach or crime or whatever happens, you may be looking at a $17 to $18 million event that it's going to cost your company. But yet you're trying to make or people please or company please, right? For compliance, I want to do business with you. You need a $10 million policy. And I stress that to CFOs and people. Don't let a compliance or a contract drive your limits or drive your protection. Be proactive, find out what it's going to cost if the event happens. And like you said, Alan, it's expensive Forensics is expensive, notification costs, rebuilding, eradication, containment, recovery, all of that adds up. People want to know, why does an average breach cost 3.4 million or whatever it is now? It adds up. It adds up quickly. And business interruption, that's the other thing. So
yeah. So are carriers typically now adding all of those different pieces into those policies, or are they still pretty scattered as to what the offering includes?
no, they are. There's usually probably 10 to 12 items. It's a itemized list for coverages. But the thing that I see are a lot of sub limits. So if you buy a $5 million policy, you may have sub limits of $1 million here, $1 million here. So they kind of, it's not a bait and switch, but it's kind of we want to cover you, but we're really not going to cover you 100%.
Gotcha.
Because we know that this is going to happen. So we're only going to give you $1 million for that.
Gotcha.
I see that. I cringe at those policies. And there's also a lot of exclusions that I find, Alan. A tech company I insured a couple of years ago here in Alpharetta, big tech company, good size. And I asked the CFO, do you have subcontractors? He said, yes, we do. I said, well, your current policy excludes subcontractors. And so when I went in, he said, what are you talking about? I said, look, on page 250 right here, it says no subcontractors. He hadn't a clue. Now he just spent $40,000 or $50,000 on an errors and omissions policy for his tech company that doesn't cover 100 of his employees.
Wow.
So, so those are the things we need to look out for. When I go in and scrub policies and look at things, I look for the gaps. I'm not concerned at what the front page says. I want to see where the takeaways are, where the exclusions are, or where the gaps are. And we can talk a little bit about that business email compromise if you want.
Yeah, so that's absolutely one of the benefits of working with an expert like yourself. You know, other lay people or business owners get that giant policy, and trying to go through that and know what to look for is really difficult. And rarely do we have time to just sit down and go through that and really pay attention to what we're looking at.
Right.
So absolutely super important.
Right.
So I know when we redid our policy the last time, our carrier actually had us go through a large assessment for our cybersecurity stance. You know, what technologies we deployed. Are you seeing that across the board now, or other carriers doing that kind of as the underwriting, or is it pretty much, hey, just, you know, here's what you need. Here, how big are you? How much revenue, and how
that'll depend on the risk. That depends on the limits that you want as a client. If you know a simple $1 million policy, depending on the industry you're in. But what I like to see is a robust application from the carrier. So I deal with probably 150 insurance carriers. There's less than 10 that I really depend on when it comes to good cyber stuff. So those applications are 10 to 12, some of them 15 pages long. I never want to present a client with a cyber application that's 2 pages, especially if they want X amount of coverage. And there's not going to be a carrier that's going to give you $5 to $10 million worth of coverage on a 2-page application. So that level of maturity of security, right, is disclosed by you filling out a robust application. If you need more than 10 million, they may need a security audit that proves, here's what we have, here are all the controls we have in place. But usually the applications are pretty thorough when it comes to the carriers that I deal with. And now we're blending that too with a crime policy, because of now business email compromise. You have things like invoice manipulation, where people are changing routing instructions on invoices without them knowing it, and that's not covered under a regular cyber policy. So be careful. buy a good crime policy. Make sure it's endorsed for social engineering, invoice manipulation, fraudulent transfers, all that fun stuff. It's not easy. It takes work.
Yeah, absolutely. The cyber crime piece is bigger and bigger, and a lot of people don't realize, the FDIC will protect a consumer bank account, but that does not cover anything on a business bank account. So any kind of wire transfer fraud that we see coming through business email compromise is not covered under FDIC. So that's going to fall to your insurance company, and that's where the cyber crime is going to cover that. Correct. Yeah.
So do your homework. That's all. Make sure you cover it. We're not in the 80s anymore. This is a different game. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
So if a company thinks that they have been breached, at what point do they get their insurance company involved? I mean, when do you call that when do I call Ralph and say, hey, I got a problem?
Well, the first thing is, so I'm on the Electronic Crimes Task Force here in Atlanta, and that I meet with the Secret Service and the FBI all the time, GBI. We all meet together. Your first indication that you've been breached is usually by law enforcement or a client, but it's usually a knock on the door or a phone call, and it's one of the officials telling you, here's what's happening. Once that is established, then usually we're the second call. I get the calls. Actually, sometimes I get the call first, and then I call the GBI or the FBI. Some of my clients that have been hacked with some malware and ransom attacks. And then we kick into gear and we find out, the cyber team of the insurance company goes into action, and they notify authorities. But the authorities will tell you, they have a good cyber response. Their containment and their recovery is real good. The people that they use are excellent. And they're going to tell you, look, don't unplug anything. Here's what you do. Here's the process. Because people want to rip the cords out and then call us. We say, no, don't do that. Call us first. We'll let you know what to do. So it's a process. And like you said, Alan, most people they don't have a clue what they do. I get a phone call and people are screaming in the background. I think the building's on fire. And meanwhile, all their screens are blue. They've got a pop-up for malware, for ransom attack, and no one knows what to do. And it's like a fire drill. You really have to be prepared and practice for when it's going to happen, because chances are it will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about disaster preparation a lot here at ASC Group. And the most frequent disaster is some kind of a data breach or a ransomware attack. It's not a tornado or something like that hits people here in Atlanta. It's a data breach. It's a digital attack of some type. Ralph, thank you so much for joining us today on Cyber Sentinel. If anybody has more questions about what we've talked about today, you can reach out to us online at #Cyber Sentinel. Or Ralph, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, probably through you. I mean, or Snellings Walters through our website. My email is rpasquariello@snellingswalters.com. Good luck with that. Or through Alan. Alan, you have my contact. So.
Absolutely. Ralph, thank you so much for being our guest. And that's all we've got for this episode.